Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, January 12th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 232 days. The game against Michigan in 323 days. There is more news on the NFL draft declaration front, and the Buckeyes got some good news and some bad news on Thursday. Let's start with the bad news. Prepare your fainting couches. Marvin Harrison Jr. is declaring for the NFL draft. I know, I'm as shocked as you were. I'm sure we all saw the reports that Ohio State was preparing $1.3 trillion in NIL to woo him back. Sadly, that has not happened. Arguably, it was never happening. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Marvin Harrison heading to the NFL. We're also here to talk about Emeka Egbuka not heading to the NFL. Some very, very good news. On the whole, that's probably a win for Ohio State because Marvin Harrison was pretty much never coming back. I'm joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And Kevin, before we talk about Marvin Harrison, the on-field player, I think we have to just take a second just to talk about Marvin Harrison off the field and sort of the stuff that we got to see inside the Woody. We talk all the time about, oh, look, he's on the Monarch machine. He's constantly working. He's constantly, always putting in the work, putting in the extra time. He also was one of the most friendly, outgoing, unassuming players I have covered over the years at Ohio State. And, when you're the son of an NFL Hall of Famer and one of the best wide receivers in the country in probably the last decade, you don't have to be that way. But Marvin Harrison was just, his whole time in Columbus, just a class act from beginning to end.
Yeah, he really was. I mean, he would not be hesitant to come over and say hello. I mean, if you went up and talked to him, he would always talk to you. Ohio State doesn't normally have a lot of guys that I can remember through the years that are just downright, avoiding the media, don't want any part of it. I can remember maybe a couple of coaches, but maybe not players as much. And, he was a treat to cover. I mean, he was a hard worker. I think he's really kind of set the work ethic at Ohio State for years to come, but just a super kid. And we did a live show on Wednesday night where somebody's like, "I promise you, Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming back." And I wasn't quite sure how I could bet all of the super chats we've ever received on that against that happening, but I sure wanted to because there was no chance that he was going to come back. He is going to probably go no lower than number 4 to Arizona, barring some sort of, the draft order changing with trades and things of that nature. But this one was about as expected as they came. We had a story ready probably more than a month ago, I would imagine. Basically, the only thing you had to put in was the day of the week that he decided that this was going to happen. This was a foregone conclusion.
And so you just touched on what his future may be. Top 5 NFL draft pick, almost for sure. Maybe top 3, top 2. And, if wide receiver was valued, maybe more than, as much or more than the quarterback position. Maybe number 1, him joining up with Justin Fields in Chicago, that if the Bears can work some kind of a trade down there, that might not be a bad pairing. But wherever he is, he feels like one of the most sure bets of any Ohio State player, just in terms of ability, athleticism, work ethic, the whole package. Just, it feels like he's going to be successful wherever he goes. Now, looking back at his Ohio State career, it took him, now I think everyone remembers the 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl and thinks, oh, he must have had like 17 touchdowns his freshman year. He entered that Rose Bowl game with, I think, 6 catches and had, I believe, 5 catches including the 3 touchdowns in that Rose Bowl game in 2021. And then, boom, went off in 2022, 2023. Just always just such a consistent, big-time performer, incredible catches, just one of those guys who just on the field did everything right. And I would have loved to see Marvin Harrison in 2023 with C.J. Stroud. Speaking of NFL draft decisions that were not going to happen, C.J. Stroud was not going to come back for 2023, but if he had, oh man, another year of C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison would have been remarkable this year.
It really would have. And the thing that you have to remember, and it's a result of how the room is. When you had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba ahead of you, and while JSN and Marvin Harrison Jr. played different roles in the offense, you still had guys ahead of you, and that's the issue. I think we're going to sit there and look back here in a couple years with guys like Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, and how did these guys not manage to get any real run their first year? And we're going to be like, well, because Ohio State had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, and we'll get to him in a minute. So once Marvin finally was able to break through, there was no turning back. And I think one of the great tragedies, other than the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. was not part of a team that was able to beat the team up north, was that we did not get to see a 2023 where Ohio State's passing game was completely right. And people can sit there and try and put it on one guy or another guy. And I think that there was plenty of blame to go around as to why the passing game wasn't right. But we could have really seen, I think, a special season, as you'd mentioned, if CJ Stroud's eligibility would have lined up in a way of where he had to come back for one more year. CJ Stroud made the right decision in going pro as he's getting ready to take on the Cleveland Browns in the first round of the AFC playoffs. And Marvin Harrison Jr.'s decision was a no-brainer as well, and is going to prove to be right, as he will be a top 5 pick when the NFL draft descends upon Detroit, Michigan, here in, I believe, April.
So you mentioned earlier sort of the culture in the room and the younger guys watching Marvin Harrison, his work ethic, what he did to get ready for every single practice, every single game. It feels like we've had, just over the years, that culture has sort of been passed down, and it was Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell and Johnny Dixon, and then it was now I'm trying to remember which guys came with which one. Austin Mack and Ben Victor, and then it was Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and then now you've got Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka, and then though they're going to be passing it down to that next group below. It does feel like that culture in that room, sort of the consistent excellence you've seen out of that room over the years. It feels like that's, you hear about, these societies with the storytelling traditions and being passed down from generation to generation. It feels like it's sort of the same thing in that wide receiver room, where you've had these guys sort of demonstrate, like, hey, this is what it takes to get to where you want to be, over and over and over, and just passing down. And now Emeka Egbuka is going to be back for another year to help, continue that tradition, but also passing it down to Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, as you mentioned, Jeremiah Smith coming in this year, Mylan Graham coming in later this year. It just feels like that torch is just sort of getting passed now from Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka to Emeka Egbuka and some of those younger guys in that room.
Right. You can sit there and you can look to what's happening on the field of the Woody really on any given day. And then you can also look at what's happening those 18 Sundays during football season, during the NFL, and see the results that are being put up. I mean, we saw Terry McLaurin. It took until the last minutes of the Commanders season for him to hit 1,000 yards, to be the first player for the Commanders, I think, to have 4 1,000-yard receiving seasons. We saw Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. I mean, heck, with all of the issues that the Jets had, Garrett Wilson still getting to 1,000 yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Seattle finally figures out what to do with him. I mean, he's blowing up right now at this point. I mean, all of these guys have taken the torch from Michael Thomas, who may be on the decline of his career. I mean, he's been out for a while. And then you sit there and you see Emeka Egbuka being out there. And I mean, I think we'll probably see Reese Stocksdale out there for every day forever. I mean, he was always the guy that was out there with Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll see who it is that Emeka is going to be able to bring out. And you're going to have guys that are going to take to that culture, that are going to have all of that free time out there working on their craft. And you mentioned Jeremiah Smith, and nobody takes their game quite as seriously as Jeremiah Smith that I've seen coming directly out of high school. I got to cover Jeremiah a lot closer than I got to cover Marvin Harrison Jr., just based on where my recruiting travels take me. I have no doubt that Jeremiah Smith is probably going to break another Monarch machine, and they're going to have to get Monarch 3.0 because of just overuse. And And it's going to be something that just goes on and on and on and on. And that's how you end up becoming blank position you, by having that type of culture, that type of lead by example, and passing it on.
And Emeka Egbuka will be there this year to pass it on. It looked for a while. He had that injury, that ankle injury last year, missed a bunch of time. Just didn't seem like he was ever 100% again at the end of the year. And there was a time when I thought it's really too bad. In 2022, you had Jackson Smith-Njigba have that injury and just kind of never end up getting back on the field and being 100%. And just what a missed opportunity that was to see Jackson Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka together. And then Emeka Egbuka misses, functionally, almost half of the season in terms of either being hurt or not being 100%. And it was like, man, another year where you had the what if at wide receiver for Ohio State. Well, now Emeka Egbuka is coming back. The wide receiver room is a position where you never really worry about Ohio State being shorthanded or not having enough talent. If you look at the numbers, though, there's not as many bodies in there as there typically are. Now, the guys that are in there are top drawer guys, but you don't have 10, 12 ready to go wide receivers in that room right now because you've had a lot of guys transfer out. So it feels like getting Emeka Egbuka back might be kind of a sneaky big deal for the 2024 Buckeyes.
You're right. I think if you look at the amount of production that has left, obviously with Marvin Harrison Jr. being the guy, the reigning Biletnikoff winner for the nation's top wide receiver, it's a big hit. And then in terms of bodies, when you lose Julian Fleming, you lose Rogers and Rogers to the transfer portal, Brandon and Noah, no relation. You're losing a lot at that point. And even the production of Cade Stover going out the door as well. So being able to bring a guy like Emeka is a big get for Ohio State as they are breaking in a new old quarterback in Will Howard, somebody who has a lot of experience playing college football, has not played a single down in the scarlet and gray for Ohio State. But that is a tremendous safety net to have as you still be able to bring out guys like Tate and Ennis and Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham and what have you there. But the rotation certainly is much more thin. And dare I say, if Ohio State lost Emeka Egbuka, could you imagine Ohio State actually having to go to the portal to bring in maybe a little bit of veteran leadership for the room? That would have been a very real possibility, just because that room gets really young immediately.
Yeah, it is. The talent is never a question. The depth is, could have been a question. Seems like that's probably not as much of an issue now with the Egbuka back. I just sort of, at this point, as we're recording shows, I'm just sort of reflexively checking Twitter every 30 seconds or so, just to make sure we haven't had any other NFL draft declarations. So far, so good. Still waiting on running back Travion Henderson. Still waiting on defensive end JT Tuimoloau. Those are kind of the last two big pieces to the puzzle for Ohio State for 2024. Will they be back? Will they head off to the NFL? We'll be back, I'm sure, not very long from now, 5 minutes from now, 24 hours from now, who knows? Whenever it happens, we'll be here to tell you all about it. And boy, this is quite a team taking shape for the Buckeyes in 2024, with a whole lot of juniors coming back. So far, only Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mike Hall declaring for the NFL. That's it. That's all from the underclassmen declaring for the NFL. So a lot of talent potentially coming back for the Buckeyes, and what could be a very, very special, very exciting 2024 season. We would love to share that season with you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Kevin and Tony and I cover the team. Mark covering recruiting. It's been a very busy recruiting week. Some potential decisions from some very, very highly ranked targets coming soon for the Buckeyes. That could be in the coming days and weeks. You're going to want to make sure you are up to speed on all that stuff. Mark has been working overtime this week, cranking out a ton of content with a lot of insight and analysis on some of those decisions that could be coming, and could be a pretty good month for the Ohio State recruiting team. And then, of course, Ross and Devin and Mickey and Justin, all making you a smarter football fan, covering you with the X's and O's, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Of course, make sure you check us out also at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. I'm just going to pretty much guarantee you we will have some sort of a breaking news show at some point in the next day or two as more NFL draft decisions come out. You're going to want to make sure you are subscribed there at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, and that you've also hit the bell there so you get notified when we go live, because sometimes this news breaks and we just sort of hop on and don't have a lot of lead time. So Make sure you are subscribed, you hit that bell, all that good stuff at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.